What is the earliest potential Let's Play? I'm talking full motion video gameplay of a game with voiceover and game sound. Well, the early 1980s, roughly. Nothing was really stopping people from recording themselves playing Atari games on a VHS tape, and sound channel mixes existed for a while. Here's one I have from the 60s with a whole 4 transistors. This is basically the minimum you'd need to make Let's Plays, and we also already have people online talking about, like, in one case, someone's dad recorded themselves playing Zelda, the first Zelda, on a VHS, so it's not out of the realm of possibilities that some guy who was a really big nerd included a voiceover. However, VHS quality kinda sucks, but if you wanted some, I don't know, better quality, it would have been really hard. Keep in mind, for Let's Plays to be Let's Plays, we would also need to upload them somewhere, and YouTube's first video was uploaded in mid-2005, so you'd basically have to be obscenely rich to even buy so many VHS tapes, or you would need to use, if you wanted some decent quality, some kind of hyper fancy and expensive Laserdisc recording setup, but yeah, many thousands of bucks later, maybe. So that clears it up. Now, why is there so much of the video still left? Well, because I thought to myself, well, what is the earliest possible time you could record this stuff at without being prohibitively expensive and unreasonable and in decent quality, and you could store it for long enough so it could actually be uploaded to YouTube, and down a massive rabbit hole I went. First, we have to accept that analog video has failed us and look towards digital video. We can ignore any microphone or video editor related questions in this video because the editing software and good microphones have existed for basically ages, and acceptable quality microphones alongside the basic editing we'd need to do did definitely exist during the 90s. I mean, Final Fantasy VII exists. Our two main factors are the recording and storing of the footage. So, what's the earliest point we could do that at? First, I think we should look at some of the codecs that were available to use at the time, primarily MPEG-1 and MPEG-2. They're both solid video formats that let you record stuff at a pretty solid quality for the time. MPEG-1 could see use from 1992 onwards, and MPEG-2 properly hit the scene in 1996. The biggest difference between 1 and 2 is that, well, 2 is more efficient, allows for interlaced video, and is generally the newer codec. So, let's deal with the capture cards first because we need to somehow capture the footage. Now, there are some very early cards that I could find, and it's hard because there's basically no info about them, and they were absurdly niche back then, and there's basically zero info of them online today. However, from what I managed to find exploring strange archives and strange websites, one thing was for certain. I kept reading notes like, not even a Pentium could handle a full 30 frames per second recording. Because, I mean, that was true for a while. The CPUs were just too slow, and that's kind of a third thing we need to keep track of, just great, because analog video may suck, and doing that will be really expensive, but with digital video, it's way too slow. So what can we do now? For a baseline, the ATI All-in-Wonder was a card that released in late 1996. It kinda sucked, but it could record stuff. It, in fact, had an input for S-Video, alongside composite and stereo in, and the same outputs as well. And yes, you could record video on it with one slight caveat. The encoding was done on the CPU. Yes, the slow-ass CPU. And, oopsie daisies, that's not gonna work for us. So then I randomly got sent this video by LGR, and yeah, that's just about the thing that I was hoping for. A consumer-grade MPEG-1 encoder in a box. The specific encoder here is the CLM4111. It encodes MPEG-1 video at up to 352 by 240 or 320 by 240 or PAL at 30 FPS at up to 3 megabits per second from 1997 onwards. That's okay. So we can actually test this. We have some data. So 240p roughly either NTSC or PAL or 320 by 240 at 30 FPS, MPEG-1, 1 to 3 megabits, and you could do it from 1997 onwards. Okay, I'm gonna go throw together 10 minutes of PS1 game footage. Actually, the hypothetical us will just record our games in 10-minute or like 9-minute and 59-second episodes because we just had the foresight to plan ahead for YouTube's early 10-minute video limit. Let's see what this can do. You know, trying to open this file first broke Windows a bit for me. Maybe I released an ancient demon. Hopefully not. After moving to a video in a different folder, I noticed an audio issue, and it turned out it was VLC shitting itself because I was using MP2 for the audio. And opening it up in Kdenlive, it ran okay. Like, sure, it may have attempted to release the Curse of Ramses on my PC, but with the slab returned, it ran fine. And the file size is 224 megabytes, for an active game no less. Let's do some more testing. So, this was at a constant 3 megabits per second. Let's test it out at 1 and 2 megabits. Right now, we could put a total of 3 of these onto a single CD. So the 3 megabit looks fine, the 2 megabit has very noticeable compression, like to the point of it being distracting, and the 1 megabit file has such bad blocking that it's basically unusable for fast footage like this. So let's try some slower footage, shall we? But before that, let's do some more file size math. Also, I'll refer to megabits as megs from now on for brevity's sake, so keep that in mind. So 3 of these 3 meg files could just about fit on one CD. For our 2 meg files, we could just about fit 4 of them, and for our 1 meg files, we could just about fit 8 of them onto a CD. Now, later CDs that have a bit more room, if you had an 800 megabyte CD or something, you could fit 5 meg 2 files, but that only happened after DVDs already hit the market, something we'll get to later. So, fast-paced games basically require 3 meg video, so what about the other end of the spectrum? Well, we already have the file sizes, so let's see what we can do. Resident Evil 2 has cutscenes with fluid, full-motion video, however, it also has mostly static backgrounds. The FMV video looks acceptable at the resolution in question, mostly because the PS1 FMVs were already at a pretty low bitrate, so it's really not that noticeable. The gameplay itself, though, looks mostly fine, though with noticeable compression around moving objects, and this is especially noticeable if there's a lot of motion from stuff like the fire particles in the starting area. Overall, 1 meg is more than enough for static games like Resident Evil in most cases, though you may still encounter a few issues here and there. Another test I did was Mega Man Legends. 1 meg looks pretty bad, but 2 and 3 megs are pretty comparable. Of course, 2 is a bit worse than 3, but considering that you could fit a third more Mega Man onto your CDs, it would make more sense to do it this way depending on your preference. Here are some more situations where you'd be playing 3D 240p games. 1 meg Mario looks a bit like shit, though it also looks a lot like many Mario 64 Let's Plays on YouTube, to be fair. 2 meg Mario is downright acceptable most of the time, though you can still notice the compression, and 3 meg fixes that. 1 meg Quake looks like utter ass, 2 meg is tolerable, and 3 meg, however, looks a lot more tolerable, but still a bit eh. This is generally an issue with recording games that have a lot of really grainy, high-contrast textures. They just look smeared. 1 meg Medieval looks downright diabolical, 2 meg Medieval looks fine, and 3 meg Medieval looks great. Spyro only looks good at 3 meg, though 2 meg is okay, while Twisted Metal just looks like ass below 3 megs. So, the faster the game goes, the hungrier the bitrate will be. Got it? But what about 2D titles, you may ask? Well, there's not much variance, excuse my old fucked up captures, however, the simpler or slower titles look fine with 1 meg, though 2 meg makes them a lot better, and 3 meg will be reserved for some higher movement situations with like lots of moving parts like shmups or something, but generally 2 meg is what you would want a lot of the time. Right, so a DVD-R was released in 1997, and they throw a monkey-sized wrench, or maybe a wrench-sized monkey, into this math, and they also allow us some new opportunities. You see, to go through the file size conundrum for our current setup, early DVD-Rs recorded up to 4 GB of data. This would increase later, but let's quickly just use this number. So, 4 GB. That means we can put 17 of our 3 meg, 26 of our 2 meg, and 48 of our 1 meg files onto a DVD. With 48 1 MB files, that's 48 times 10 minutes, which, for those who can't do math, is roughly 8 hours, which means that we could probably fit an entire Resident Evil 2 Let's Play onto a single DVD. Wow. Once it's 4.7 GB, that goes up to 20, 30, and 57, by the way. But now we reach a new era, an era of standard definition. Yay. So let's see what we can find in the market. So we did find this on a random Columbia University site from ages ago that's still up. Thanks, by the way. There's an OptiBase MPEG Fusion card that can let us capture at 480p at 15 megs. The website has been last updated in 1998, and oh, that's pretty good. And the street price for this thing is 29,000? Alright then. What else is there? Oh, there's a $300 Matrox Marvel G400 card, but it does MJPEG instead, and you can transcode into MPEG in software. Fine, I'll take a look at it. Okay, this thing can capture at 480p 30 FPS at full quality of 3 megabytes per second this time, so 24 megs. We can, however, then transcode this stuff to the MPEG-2 format once we're done, so this will show us both the quality loss of MJPEG and MPEG. So let's do some testing. After fighting MLT, which did not expect me to record things with MJPEG in 2025, I got my video. My 720 by 480 24 meg video. Now, if you would excuse the slightly bad pixel size I was using, the actual MPEG recording looked fine. So for our MPEG-2 settings, let's first go with 3 megs and see what that gets us for MPEG-2. Funnily enough, my PC rendered it faster than standard MJPEG, but that's cause the quality has been kinda balkanized. Overall, it's not terrible, definitely peak mid-2000s YouTube, but it still has noticeable blocking. So, I tried 4 meg and 5 meg, and the difference was there, but barely noticeable. So I tried out 2 meg and 1 meg. They looked worse. So then I tried out a game like Silent Hill 2. The MJPEG looked fine, so I immediately tried out MPEG at 1, 2, and 3 megs, and they all looked worse than the MJPEG original, with very noticeable blocking though. 4 meg fixed most of it. The next game I chose is Battalion Wars. I ran it in anamorphic widescreen, but trust me, it's still the same resolution. The MJPEG version looked fine as always, but then I noticed something was wrong with the scaling of every single video before this one, so I had to fix it later. It doesn't matter much anyways, but keep it in mind if your video, if you're doing this, looks a little bit different. 5 meg looked great on this one. The other bitrates all looked a bit worse from each other, and MJPEG clearly was the best, but it was over 3 times the size of the 5 meg clip, so there you go. For the 240p method, you'd use 1 to 3 megs. For the 480p method, you'd use 3 to 5 megs. If you're doing something like Resident Evil 1, you know, the one with the static backgrounds in the GameCube, maybe you could get away with 2 megs, I don't know. So for the more important question, how many discs would this eat? Well, we're gonna be using the same ballpark of 10-minute episodes. So for all of this, you could record either 30, 40, or 80 minutes of 240p video on a CD, depending on the quality, and once on proper DVDs with 4.7 gigs, that goes up to 200, 300, and 570 minutes of video if it's 3.2 or 1 meg. For 480p stuff, I'm not even gonna bother to do the CD math, but for 480p stuff, you'd have either 120, 150, or 200 minutes of video, depending on if it's 5, 4, or 3 megs. So how much could you reasonably record in one day? Like, I don't know, if you were a dedicated gamer with a job, like 2 hours on weekdays, and at most like 8 hours of weekends if you had no life, because you also have to kind of like edit and burn that. So sure. The issue is that is 26 hours total, 156 episodes. For our sizes, that's 3, 6, 8, 11, or 13 DVDs, depending on what format we use. But let's go back to CDs for a moment. For a CD, you paid about, let's say, $1 per CDR. Later on, they could get cheaper, but let's use this number. We'd need either 20, 39, or 52 of them early on. So, 20 to 52 bucks per week, or 80 to 208 bucks per month, which is, well, a lot. DVD prices were complicated. They generally fell a lot during the early 2000s, and were expensive beforehand. So I found that if you bought huge packs, you could get the price down very low. So I'll use the somewhat liberal estimate of $3 per disc. This obviously dropped later, but this gives us about 10 to 40 bucks per week, or 40 to 160 per month, which is less, but still a lot. Of course, this is only considering the price of the discs and not even the price of the actual games that you would play, but you know. Keep in mind, you only had to keep this disc recording up to 2005, when YouTube finally allowed you to upload these videos free of charge. This is the end of our journey with one caveat. You see, before we upload these videos to YouTube, we have to re-encode them at 640 by 480. Why? Because 640 by 480 is inherently higher quality in terms of how online compression works. It's weird, I don't want to get into it, and even though YouTube would be limited to 240p till mid-2008, and it would only allow 480p or 720p in later wait, they still kept the original files and re-encoded them to the base resolution later. There are many videos that are in 720p from well before 720p was introduced, just because that was the original source file size. And there you have it. At this point, HD consoles with HDMI, proper HD PVRs that could record those consoles and that were built for recording those consoles were on the horizon, alongside Dxtory and similar software and PCs. So there's no real reason to fiddle around with this kind of archaic tech anymore. From this point onwards, any subsequent Let's Play would also just wait on your hard drive until it was time to upload them. You just use the same PVR to capture videos at an even better quality now. There's a reason no professional Let's Plays existed back then. It was hard, there was basically no market, and for those who did record games back then, like, nobody watched them really. It only took up later for Let's Plays to properly kick off after YouTube prioritized watch time, which, wow, yeah, this channel really benefits from it, doesn't it? Of course, you could go all into the assumptions and complain about this video because there were a lot of them, and obviously the file size numbers aren't gonna be exactly right. I'm using estimates because maybe one clip would be just a little bit shorter, so it would take up a bit less file space, and you get it. Generally speaking, could this be possible? Could have somebody tried this? Well, yeah, but only realistically if they were like a time traveler or something, because you just couldn't predict something like this actually happening. But also, if you were a time traveler, why not get rich off of future information that isn't present back then, creating a time loop and collapsing the universe along the way? I don't know. Sounds like a fun weekend to me. What do you think? Tell me down below. Bye-bye.